Good evening to you and welcome to a special edition of BBC London and a focus on a big challenge for our city. The faces of some of the young lives lost on our streets. We ask some young Londoners how they feel growing up in the capital.
The streets are cold. So it's like, these things do happen. Like, it's became so normalised that anyone that passes away now, it's like, yeah, we're shot, but we're like, what can we do about it?
It's not normal to talk about young death. And the fact that we can say it was so much calm and just no emotion or nothing's evoking within us, it's quite scary.
We'll also ask them what they think can and should be done to help tackle knife crime. Plus,
how can it be viewed as normal to carry knives and be able to use them? It's terrifying, really.
trauma nurse Joanne, just one of the many medics helping save lives. We're inside one of London's hospitals. Join me and my guests for this special programme. Hello, it's good to have you with us this evening for this special programme dedicated to hearing some young voices on an issue that is very much a reality for them, their family, friends or community, and a big issue for us here in the capital. Tonight, we'll hear how knife crime impacts young Londoners and the change they think is needed. What is the solution? I've got some guests here with me tonight dedicated to supporting their communities. First, though, here's some of the discussion BBC London held in Croydon with a group of 14 to 20-year-olds, hosted by Radio's Eddie Nestor. It starts with their reaction when they heard 15-year-old Eliane Andam was stabbed on her way to school.
When it came through on my phone, I jumped. That was the first thing. And I didn't jump just because I knew her personally, but I think because the intersex of her as a young black girl, I think that was enough for me to just evoke enough emotion within me, and I was very, very disappointed, very, very upset, very, very scarred by it. It's not normal to talk about young death, and the fact that we can say it was so much calm and just no emotion or nothing's evoking within us, it's quite scary.
How did you hear about that story?
I heard about it on Snapchat.
On Snapchat?
Yeah, on Snapchat. I heard a lot of people that I go to school with had known the girl and had posted it on their story like RIP.
How did it make you feel?
I felt more at risk.
I feel like when you come from areas that are deprived, it's just a cycle. Like someone passing away, like your grandparent, is also like your friend getting stabbed. It's just a cycle in your community.
So you don't make the distinction between the two?
There's obviously a distinction of like something is natural and something is unnatural. However, because it's so cyclical, you can't really differentiate that pain or that difference.
I need to hear from you, Cara.
So when I was 12, my brother first got like his first sentence in prison because he would always run around with all of his friends and just do robberies, like people, buildings, houses, and like all those times he would always have a knife on him just in case, as he said. He went out one day and just changed. Like he came out with a new bunch of friends and just from there on it just went downhill.
I would like to know why people carry knives.
The kind of persona of carrying knives is not only glorified through music and things like that, but it's also seen as a necessity to some people. For example, if children in school are experiencing bullying, for example, to the point where they feel like they can't get help.
I think people see it as a way to protect themselves. Like carrying knives has become so glorified. People who carry knives believe kind of like they look cool in a way.
Is that cool? You think it's attractive?
No.
I know someone that obviously passed away as well, that I used to play football with as well. Like I was mad upset because I was thinking, right, this was someone I used to kick ball with as well. I used to see every Friday. And
how did he die?
He got stabbed.
But you know when you talk about somebody getting stabbed, and please forgive me, because it may well be my age, right?
Yeah.
To me, I'm like, what kind of world are we living?
We live in a crazy world, that's what it is. Like, the streets are cold. So it's like, these things do happen. Like, it's became so normalised that anyone that passes away now, it's like, yeah, we're shocked, but we're like, what can we do about it?
One of my friends was murdered due to knife crime. And obviously I was very close with him. So the fact that he was taken from me so soon, I didn't expect it. It was just like, it's a random thing, and it's something that stays with me to this day.
Are you saying it like it's normal?
It's just kind of what happens. It's not normal. I had to deal with it, and it hurt. Like, obviously it hurt, but kids our age, they're dying every day, and it's not the first time I'd heard of something like that.
I'd be in school and there'll be people who wouldn't have a pen on them, but having a knife on them was the norm.
Well, one of my guests tonight is Talisha Gopal, who was at that discussion and whose brother was fatally stabbed in 2015. Welcome to you, Talisha. It's really good to have you here. And I do want to ask about your brother in a moment. But first, can I ask you, being in that discussion, was there anything that you heard that surprised you? Because I imagine it will have shocked some of our viewers tonight.
A lot of what was said is nothing new to me, or it doesn't shock me in any way. You know, you live you grow up in an environment where these things are happening quite regularly. It just becomes the norm.
And that word there, normalised, desensitised, part of life.
Yeah. A lot of young people are very desensitised by stabbings now, especially because it's so much on social media, it's played out, and again, they're traumatised, but they just don't know what to do with their emotions.
And can I ask about your brother, Jermaine?
Yes.
Tell us what happened.
So Jermaine was 15 years old when he was killed. He was actually on his way home, and unfortunately a group of people that decided to come down to our local area decided to target my brother. He was with a group of friends, but he was walking home, and unfortunately they targeted anyone that they thought that may be in part of a gang in the area, and they saw Jermaine, and automatically that he was one of their targets, and he's stabbed numerous times, and he died on the scene.
I'm so sorry. But you have taken that pain and that experience to campaign in schools against knife crime.
Absolutely, it has to be done. Has to be done. I go into primary schools. I started off in primary schools because you have to get to them early, because once they hit secondary school.
And just hearing you say that, primary schools, you know, again, it's so young.
I speak to year 5s, year 6s, and a lot of them, when I ask them, do you know anything about knife crime? The majority of the room know about knife crime, especially in particular areas. And I think because it's broadcasted so much on social media now that pretty much every child knows about knife crime, we can't hide away from it.
And that was something that came up, didn't it, in the discussion, that actually that is where people are hearing their news. That's where they heard about Eliane. It's social media, effectively. It's a fairly sort of small world.
It is, isn't it? It is. I mean, young people, the first thing they do, and like in the discussion, they highlighted it quite well. The first thing you do, you pick up your phone in the morning, you look at social media. That is what they do, and that is their normal. It's different from when I grew up, because we didn't have that access to phones, but now phones are so accessible, the internet's so accessible that young people can see any and anything online.
How do you cope day by day, not only without your brother, but actually being involved in this all the time, that desire to change, and are you seeing enough of it?
To be honest with you, I work through my passion, because I'm so passionate about my brother, and the fact that he didn't get to see his future, his life was cut at the age of 15. So I'm so passionate about what I do, and I want to see change. I want to see an improvement, and working with young people is you're not going to improve unless you work with the young people to get their voices heard.
Okay. Well, Talisha, we're going to leave it there just for the moment. Thank you so much. And we will come back to it because we've got more of that discussion to come. So thank you so much. And Talisha's brother is just one story of sadly too many, which needs to change. And it's why we're talking about it. And to get a sense of the bigger picture here in the capital, let's go over to our Home Affairs correspondent, Sonia Jessup, for more. Sonia.
Thanks, Riz. Yeah, if we look at how many young people are losing their lives, in 2021 we had a record number, 30 teenage homicides. Most of them were stabbings. Now, luckily last year that figure was halved, but still 14 were killed. And numbers are rising again. 20 teenagers have died so far this year. Now, of course, this doesn't give the full picture. We know many young people survive stabbings, but with terrible injuries. One of London's major trauma centres, St Mary's in Paddington, admitted more than 400 victims last year. They invited us in and they told us about the kind of things they're seeing.
Hi, I'm Jo Lockwood-Smith. I'm the nurse consultant for major trauma at St Mary's in Paddington. I've been working in major trauma for the last 12 years. So I'm just showing you some data from April 2022 to 2023 about the amount of patients that we've had who have been admitted either through assault, which includes stabbing, or a blow. So 80% of that 482 that have become inpatients have all been stabbed. I haven't seen it for a while, but there was a fashion, and still is to a point, for some gangs to stab one another in the buttocks. And this can often lead to them requiring a colostomy bag. So those patients suffer quite significantly from a psychological point of view, that they're young kids and their faeces are coming out through their stomach, essentially. So for a lot of people, this is a common injury to get when you've been stabbed in the chest. So the space in between your lung and your chest wall can either fill up with blood or air or both. From a neurophysiological point of view, these patients are constantly in a flight or flight mode. So they are always, their back is always up. They are always on the lookout for danger. They are quick to fire, they're quick to anger, they're quick to respond in a negative way, and it's come from a place of fear. Often we have to keep patients in isolation inside rooms that are high-risk patients. So patients that there might be a chance of gangs coming onto the ward to try and finish what was started, basically.
We have these body-worn cameras that any member of staff can wear if they feel that they are potentially going to be threatened by one of our patients or patients' relatives or visitors on the ward.
It's what I've worked in for many years, but now I have 2 boys of my own, and that becomes even more tangible at that point. And you think, how can it be viewed as normal to carry knives and be able to use them? It's terrifying, really.
That was Joanne, a trauma nurse at St Mary's in Paddington. And Sonia, you've been speaking today to the Met, and interestingly, they didn't come up in that discussion, that sort of young people roundtable discussion, for once, I guess.
Yeah, I think the challenge for the Met is, on the one hand, they speak to some people, including families who've lost loved ones to knife crime, and they say, you know what, we want more stop and search. But it's a controversial tactic, and if it's done badly, it damages trust, particularly among those young people. So the Met's recognise it needs to engage much more closely with communities on how they want that done. I asked them what else they're doing to protect young people.
Doing weapon sweeps, knife screening operations. They've been going into schools and been doing engagement sessions, just trying to educate young people around the risks of carrying a knife. But police can't do it alone, so we know that we need to engage and work with partners. Again, for example, education, health, local authorities, the Violence Reduction Unit.
Sonia, picking up on that Mayor's Violence Reduction Unit, you got reaction today.
Yeah, the Mayor's Violence Reduction Unit has been running since 2018, and they look at that early intervention, that so-called public health approach, even from primary school age. And I asked them what they think the solutions are.
We've got a very high rate of absenteeism. We need to be looking at what makes inclusive education, how we get more kids back in school, how we reduce exclusions. It means giving a whole family support, working with parents. It's absolutely youth work in the community, as well as in those places where we know young people have been most affected by violence, such as custody suites and in hospitals.
I think the challenge for the VRU is also showing that it is actually getting results, because these things take a lot of time. And LibPEC was saying to me it needs a long-term strategy, long-term funding. That's the kind of thing we're hearing from a lot of groups who are asking for more resources, more funding. It's also about working better together too.
OK, and we'll pick up on that better together later on. Thanks very much, Sonia. We will chat later. If you are just joining us, a reminder, you're watching a special edition of BBC London looking at the impact of knife crime on young Londoners. But you can see more on the day's other news on our website at the address there or on the BBC News app. But let's return now to the young Londoners who have been sharing their thoughts on violence here in the capital with my colleague, Radio London's Eddie Nestor. As part of that discussion, which took place in Croydon, we also asked them for their thoughts and ideas on what should be done, along with some possible solutions.
Pick up that microphone and tell me what we can do, solutions-based stuff. What haven't you heard? What chord do you think make a difference?
If you get excluded and you get excluded a certain amount of times, you'll get sent to a place called centre. Then what are they doing? They're just sending all the kids who they can't handle to centre. Then what's going to happen to these kids that end up in centre?
If I asked you for something that you thought was positive, something that you thought would help to make a difference, something that I could offer on your behalf to the people who make decisions, what would it be?
So instead of going to centre where you'll be treated like any other delinquent on the street, they should just stop doing this whole centre thing and build schools for people. And instead of them being schools for children who are misbehaving, they should be schools for children who are misunderstood.
The parents should be doing checks, like regular checks.
What?
What
am I saying? Help us.
Okay, so I
That's
can
why
help.
you're here today.
Yeah,
Tell me what I must check.
100%. So
What?
I say the mum and dad should be checking their bags, checking what's in their bag, just seeing where they're going, what friends you're around. You've got to now give them a certain discipline, like curfew. They got to be in by a certain time, stuff like that.
So we're going for parents. I'm right. I'm looking solutions here. So parents need to do more and do better.
Yeah, in some ways, 100%, because you're now basically letting your child go astray. You can enforce more.
It's easy to point fingers and say it's a parent thing and a teacher thing. I think when we enforce, I think that's when it's further far gone. I feel like it's less enforcing and more communicating. There's a saying that goes around in my family that if a child is not embraced by the village, he'll burn it down. And that's
What does that mean then?
It means that if a young person, a young boy, is not embraced by his community, is not looked after, whether that's in the family, whether that's in the school, whether that's in a church, then he will look to other resources. He will feel neglected by his community to the point where he will want to burn it down.
I also think another solution might be to actually increase the amount of years for carrying a knife in the first place.
Do you think the punishment is too light?
The difference between actually carrying it and using it is like a good 20 years. And it's like, to some people, 4 years is nothing.
The journey of a child is about inspiring. And if you're not in an environment where you can be inspired, you've got to always just be in the same system. We need to have more inspirational leaders in our community. And we can do that just by literally applying people who are in the top firms, in the top business plans, and like coming to schools and literally just saying to the students, look, I do this is how I've done it, this is my career.
When I was in primary, I was just thinking about who I'm going to play tag with at break and lunch. But it's like, when you get to high school, everything changes. Like, you get a lot more pressure put on your shoulders with your mental health gets lower, like people are way more strict. Like, I just feel like something in high school needs to change.
Be the change you want to see. In order for us to solve the problem of knife crime, we more have to look at the individuals who are part of it. So by giving them the opportunity to change, you essentially change the outcome.
I feel like everybody's operating in silos. I think everybody's saying schools, youth clubs, parents, education. This isn't going to work unless everybody's on the same page. And I think organisations are doing things greatly in their silos. Nobody's on the same page.
A lot in there. Well, Talisha, who we heard from earlier and was part of the discussion, is still with me. We're also joined by John Trend from Oxygen, which supports young people, and Sonia, our Home Affairs correspondent, back with us once again. To all of you, that end thought there, there are organisations doing great work, but in their silos, and this isn't going to work unless everybody is on the same page. John, you've spent 30 years trying to improve the lives of young people. Do you feel that is the case?
I think it is. I think we need to be working together, and that's the big challenge for us. And as a voluntary organisation, often we're the last at the table, and yet we hold some of the the knowledge that's needed from communities with grassroots, and so we can make a massive difference when we do work with others. And the project that I've developed is all about partnership and trying to get agencies to come together, but also releasing assets in the community, like the victims of knife crime, so that they can have a voice and young people can hear different perspectives on it.
How do you keep going when you hear, we saw those numbers that Sonia pointed to Talisha, her own experience. How do you keep going with that sort of perhaps cautious optimism?
I think you've just got to have that dogged determination that believes that young people have the answer and you believe in them. That's Oxygen's motto, is believing in young people, because ultimately they have the answers. But they need help and support to bring those answers out. And the knowledge that we have over time, they don't have access to unless we're working with them, walking alongside them and helping them overcome those challenges.
And talking of working alongside them, Talisha, for anyone who's just joined us, your brother was fatally stabbed and you campaign against knife crime now, and you're going into schools, especially primary schools. From what you're hearing, what would stop a young person carrying a knife?
I think more support, like what John was saying, we need to work collaboratively. I was speaking to John earlier and we was talking about collaboration work, and it's important to highlight that too much organisations work in silos. It's, I would say, more mentorship. And the reason why I say that, because a lot of young people, all they need is someone to talk to, because that helps their mental health. It keeps them positive. If you don't support a child, they will just, they are other areas where they can go down other routes and they feel like they're being supported, but actually people out there to groom them, unfortunately.
Yeah, and we heard that there, didn't we? We heard about inspiration, opportunities, but we also heard about parents, discipline, and tougher punishment. And Sonia, I just want to pick up on that. What is the situation when it comes to tougher sentencing?
Well, the maximum sentence for carrying a knife is 4 years, but if you're under 16, there's no aggravating factors. You've not done it before. I mean, you could get a caution, and the government is looking at some tougher legislation too around banning zombie knives and machetes. What I was hearing from the Met today, they were saying that's very welcome, but also in a lot of these cases it's kitchen knives that are being used, things readily available.
And John, I see you nodding at that.
Yes, I think the scales to this. I think that first time that someone carries a knife, it's often because they're scared. And I think if we criminalise them straight away, then we're pushing them into a system that they don't necessarily need to go. And I think, as has been said, if we can mentor those young people and steer them away, then we have opportunities to do that. And I think we have to look at that and take those opportunities.
Talisha, do you think that young people's voices, we heard them there, do you think they're being listened to?
Not as much as they need to be. I feel like going into schools and hearing what they have to say about knife crime, it's more impactful than listening to professionals respectively and getting them to share those concerns and telling us what their solutions are and what we need to do in order to help them is more important than hearing professionals talk about knife crime.
So briefly, if there was one message you could send to people in authority, for example, what would that be?
Speak to young people. Don't label them straight away. And I feel like young people tend to think that once you say young person, you put them in a box. Speak to them and listen to their voices.
Sonia, you have been covering so much of this, as part of what you do. You've been listening to this and watching this. Can I ask for your sort of final thought, what you've taken away from what you've heard?
Well, I think it has been key hearing those young people's voices, and it's obvious from what they're saying that they think it does need to start much earlier, that intervention, what we're hearing from other people too. And I think it would also be easy to come away from this feeling very negative, like there's not anything being done. But I think it's important to remember that knife crime, it's starting to rise, but it's still lower than it was before the pandemic, and there is a lot of brilliant work going on. I mean, that is very encouraging to hear. Change is not going to happen overnight, it's not going to happen quickly, and it's not going to happen with just one group. But I think it's important for us to keep focusing on that and hearing those stories.
Yeah, and hearing what you've had to say today. Thank you so much. Really appreciate your time, not just at the discussion, but for everything that you're doing. And let's keep talking and moving this forward, because it has to change, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Thank you. By the way, our coverage on knife crime continues tomorrow with a report from a major trauma ward where we hear from police officers based there working to protect stabbing victims. That's at the Royal London Hospital. I should just say we have been talking about some difficult things which might be upsetting for anyone watching or someone you know. So it is just worth reminding you that the BBC has pulled together a list of organisations offering help and support in confidence if you wish. Just search for BBC Action Line. You can see the details there on your screen. There's also a free phone number 24 hours a day with recorded information. So a lot to reflect on from the last half hour. Right now, though, I think it's time we should get a check on the weather. And it's over to Ben. Hi there.
Hello, Riz. Thank you. Good evening to you. Many of us actually got to see a bit of sunshine today. This beautiful scene for one of our weather watchers in the centre of London. In that sunshine today, we had temperatures up around 14 Celsius. Tomorrow will bring some sunshine as well, but temperatures certainly not up to 14. In fact, a cold wind, a much chillier feel than we've been used to of late. And that cold air is pushing in behind a weather front. That weather front barely discernible really on our satellite picture. It's just this little stripe of cloud here, but that is going to bring some rain, not a huge amount, as it pushes its way southwards through this evening. And then overnight, we do get into some slightly colder air. That said, there'll be quite a lot of cloud around and it will be quite breezy. So temperatures, they won't fall too far. We're looking at lows of 5, 6 or 7 degrees in most places. So as we head into tomorrow morning, I think we will have quite a lot of cloud around first thing. That should tend to thin and break. And then we're looking at lots of sunshine to take us through the morning and into the afternoon. But you really will notice the strength of the wind. So despite some sunshine overhead, temperatures not climbing very far at all, 7, 8 or 9 degrees. And if you happen to be thinking of a day trip to the Kent coast, maybe the Essex coast, actually here, a biting wind is going to make it feel really quite raw. Now, during Friday night, we'll see the cloud tending to melt away even further. The winds will ease as well. So actually Friday night into Saturday morning, this is going to be a cold one, perhaps the coldest we've had so far this season for some places, and we're looking at a widespread frost. Temperatures in the centre of London down to freezing, out in the suburbs, in the countryside, -2, -3 degrees, looking quite likely. We start the weekend with this area of high pressure. It will feel cold, but it won't be as windy, so maybe not actually feeling too bad out there with some sunshine. And then later in the weekend, we could see frontal systems pushing in from the west, a bit more in the way of cloud and some outbreaks of rain. But broadly speaking, mainly dry through the weekend and then actually staying cold into next week. Back to you, Riz.
Ben, thank you. And that's all from us on this special edition of BBC London, focusing on knife crime and the impact on young Londoners. Thank you to my guests who were here and those who took part in the discussion. You can hear the full debate. It's on BBC Sounds. Simply search From London. London's knife crisis. What is the solution? From all of us here on the team, thanks to you for watching. Bye-bye.